Well, welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I am, as usual, Jodelle. And what if learning how to breathe could actually enhance your fat loss and your overall health and your energy and your longevity more so than even diet and exercise? What if your breath is the missing link to your biohacks, your obsessive diet, and could actually enhance your thyroid, help you assimilate nutrition, ease your gut distress? Well, it's true. Breath of Life truly embodies what my next guest will be enlightening us on. I've brought on someone who I consider the leading authority on breathing and why it can help us with everything from fat loss to anxiety to asthma to appetite control to sleep and rest, mood swings, blood pressure, skin health, digestion, everything in between from your skull to your toes. So Patrick McKeown, breath trainer and author, has helped thousands of people around the world, including professional athletes, improve their sports performance and overall health by incorporating simple, medically proven principles and breath exercises into their lives. And I can attest to this myself as an athlete, as the techniques I've learned from Patrick and his book have vastly improved my paddle skills and my health in general. So with all that said, Patrick, after suffering lifelong asthma, sleep disturbances, soaring stress levels, he's used this Buteyko style of breathwork to reverse his health issues, and as a result, has a compilation of his work in one of my favorite books, The Oxygen Advantage. So if you don't have this, you're going to want it after this podcast. And he's also completely transformed his health with 3 simple techniques he discusses in his book, which we're going to discuss today. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Patrick McKeown. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks very much. Good to be here, Jodelle.
And am I saying your last name right, McKeown?
Yeah, that's a good one. I've heard many variations of it, so you're pretty much on the mark with that one.
All right. Well done. Good then. Okay. So tell my listeners briefly how you fell into breathwork for your health and why more so than diet and exercise, breathwork could be the missing link when it comes to achieving good health.
Yeah, I suppose that the breath it's quite a depth to which we can go with it. I was a chronic mouth breather and I never associated mouth breathing with poor sleep. So, and that's still the same way for most people. 50% of the adult population wake up with a dry mouth in the morning. Mm-hmm. And if you're sleeping with your mouth open during sleep, you're not getting a deep, deep sleep. So your sleep tends to be more light, and also you're more prone to sleep disorder breathing. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the foundation in terms of health is coming back to sleep, mm-hmm. especially for metabolism, the autonomic nervous system, and also for states of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I read a newspaper article back in 1997, and it said about the importance of breathing light, that during rest, your breathing should be very subtle. It should be through the nose, driven by the diaphragm. But I was doing none of those things. I was mouth breathing, fast breathing, upper chest breathing. And I was in that state of fight or flight. And yeah, it wasn't as if I was having panic attacks. I wasn't. And I didn't consider myself having anxiety. But I had a very distracted mind, and I would have had a lot of thought activity and a lot of time stuck in my head. And I knew my concentration and focus and attention spans were always negatively impacted in school and university. And so switching and changing my breathing patterns, switching to nose breathing, both during rest and physical exercise and during sleep, and changing breathing patterns, like even that, within a very, very short period of time, I remember sitting down and doing a nose unblocking exercise. And you can decongest your nose in about 5 minutes by simply holding the breath. And the exercise I did back then was take a normal breath in and out through my nose, pinch my nose, hold my nose, and just gently nod my head up and down, holding my breath, and hold my breath until a medium to strong air hunger. And that helped to declog my nose. So I started switching to nose breathing. And then I started slowing down my breathing to breathe a little bit less. And the temperature of my fingers increased. Oh, yeah. Because I always had cold hands and cold feet. And I suppose, like many people, I never realized I was taking those full deep breaths that people talk about. You hear it bandied about all the time. But I never realized that my blood circulation, which is 70,000 miles of blood vessels in the human body, that's influenced not by where you are breathing, but how much air you breathe. And the more air you breathe, because people often equate more breathing as being good, But the more air you breathe, your blood vessels constrict. So if the goal of the human race or people in general is to bring more oxygen throughout the body, we should be talking about breathing light and breathing slow and breathing low. And the nose is the foundation for that.
Well, I love that you touched on the nasal blocking exercise, because maybe even at some point we can take them through just briefly how to do that. But also, I don't think people realize how many people are chronically congested. Like they get so conditioned to breathing through their mouth, or just feeling that sensation of not being able to take a full breath in their nose. So while you're saying this, some people are probably thinking, well, I don't even think I could breathe through my nose. So,
yeah,
but it's definitely possible, isn't it?
Yeah, in the vast majority, and even in scientific research, like in terms of observation, I've worked with about, 8,000 people or so. And we've only had about 20 people that could not switch to nasal breathing because of really poor anatomy. So the vast majority of people, even with a deviated septum, can switch to nasal breathing. And there was a study conducted in LA at the Breathe Institute, and they looked at 600 odd people aged between something like 4 years of age up as high as 80. And the vast majority of those people could actually breathe through their nose, but they weren't necessarily breathing through the nose. And I suppose, Jodelle, it's because there's very little attention put on it. You know, how many times does a child or adult go to their healthcare professional? How often has the healthcare professional encouraged that child or adult to actively breathe through the nose? So it is being overlooked. But when we think of the human body, if we think of the mouth, what does the mouth do in terms of breathing? Nothing. It's absolutely not. There is not one function that's employed by the mouth or provided by the mouth when it comes to breathing. The mouth is simply a hole for air to come into the throat. That's it, into the lungs. It's all done by the nose. And sometimes people will say, well, I have my mouth closed, but then do you have your mouth closed during sleep? Do you have your mouth closed during physical exercise? You know, so it's not that we have the mouth open 100% of the time, but we can unknowingly spend quite a significant proportion of our day breathing in and out through an open mouth.
Yeah, and I think if people will just get that awareness throughout their day of when they're breathing through their mouth, especially like if you're talking a lot, you know, if you have a job that talks a lot, or you're moving a lot, like as a fitness trainer, you know, I have to constantly remind myself to breathe through my nose, because you want to just naturally take in bigger breaths through your mouth. But I think awareness is like the first thing. Just walk through your day and notice how much you're using your mouth to breathe, because once you switch over, it's like, you can feel the difference. You can feel the calmness in your body. You can feel the breath control better. And you can feel that your nasal passages are breathing better. So with regard to somebody like myself, I dealt with toxic mold, and it can affect the lungs, where it makes it very hard to take in a good breath, or you always feel like you have air hunger. Like, talk to me about like people that have gotten used to breathing inappropriately and how they can correct that.
So typically when somebody comes into me with respiratory conditions, and this would include long COVID, and there was an interesting article published with regards to Mount Sinai, looking at patients with long COVID, 1,800 patients, and the vast majority of them, in one particular study or by the team there, was that they had low carbon dioxide. So when somebody's coming in, and I'm not saying that carbon dioxide is the absolutely everything involved with this, but normally I start off somebody with doing gentle small breath holds just to introduce them to air hunger. And then I bring them onto the breathe light exercise, whereby I get them to breathe a little bit less air to help improve blood flow and oxygen delivery, and also to give them the tools to slow down their breathing. So we go from there then to breathing low with good amplitude or normal amplitude of the diaphragm. In other words, when they breathe in, that the lower ribs are moving out, and when they breathe out, the lower ribs are moving in. And then we go to breathing slow, to slowing down the respiratory rate to between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute, because this helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. Well, actually, in fact, breathe light, breathe slow, and breathe low all stimulate the vagus nerve. And these in turn then can increase our heart rate variability, which is, it's a measurement of vagal tone. How well is the vagus nerve working? And also in terms of, is the body in balance? So nose breathing during sleep, light breathing, slow breathing, low breathing, and then during physical exercise, bringing functional breathing into physical exercise. Like if you think of people doing physical exercise, the vast majority have their mouth open.
Right.
Mouth breathing is equating with upper chest breathing. But in terms of the human lungs, the greatest concentration of blood flow is in the lower lobes of the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So since 1988, it was known that when you breathe through an open mouth, or at least when you breathe through the nose, the CO2 in the blood increases by 10%. Mm-hmm. And even during physical exercise, breathing through the nose, it's a little bit more challenging at first. But after about 6 to 8 weeks, the body gets used to it. That's during physical exercise. So, yeah, so we normally, I'm looking at breathing from a number of different dimensions. And I think what's often overlooked in terms of breathing is the biochemistry, carbon dioxide, because there's an idea out there that bring in as much oxygen as you can and get rid of that waste gas, carbon dioxide. But when we look at the functions of carbon dioxide in the human body, it's the primary regulator of blood pH, not the food that we eat, but the primary regulator of blood pH is carbon dioxide. It's also the primary stimulus to breathe. So that every breath that we're taking is driven by carbon dioxide, not by oxygen. Mm-hmm. It's also a smooth muscle dilator. So we have smooth muscle, which is embedded in the airways, but also in the blood vessels and different organs. And if we're breathing too hard, we get rid of too much carbon dioxide from the blood through the lungs, and smooth muscle constricts. So I said that, earlier on, I spoke about my own hands feeling warmer when I was reducing my breathing and breathing a little bit less. But that wasn't just the circulation of my hands that was improving. Blood flow throughout the body, including the brain. So, when you look at people, for example, with epilepsy and the effect of hyperventilation and stress bringing on seizures. And unfortunately, nobody's touching this. For people with diabetes, how their sleep is impacted, they can have poor respiratory health. And in terms of blood sugar, helping to regulate blood sugar. In terms of sleep, I had a review article that was published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine about a month ago. I co-authored it with 2 ear, nose, and throat doctors. And it's looking at obstructive sleep apnea, insomnia, and snoring from a breathing re-education point of view. And it's all there, but it's just, I suppose, breathing doesn't get so much attention because it's difficult to commercialize it. You can't scale it. You can't make, it's not that profitable. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason it's been overlooked. And another reason that it's probably being overlooked is that people misinterpret. Many people are talking about breathing, but don't necessarily understand it. Like the instruction to tell somebody to take that deep breath is probably the wrong information and the most harmful information that you could tell somebody to do. What is a deep breath? Really, we should be looking at breathing from a light breath, a slow breath, and a low breath.
Oh, I love that you mentioned that because I'm gonna tell you a story in just a second. Mm-hmm. But as far as like the circulation you were talking about, that when your hands got warmer, that was an indication that your thyroid was working better, because a symptom of low thyroid is cold hands and feet. And so it's really cool that you were able to even increase your metabolism with breath. And I think that's underestimated. We're on all these supplements to get our thyroid working. But again, what if it's as simple as improving your CO2 levels through proper breathing? Now, going back to the deep breath, as I was trained in a specific form of yoga that a long time ago that elicits a deep, ujjayi breath, which I no longer practice because it's not beneficial to the energy of the body. In fact, it was a sense over breathing. So can you talk to us about over breathing, or what you called hyperventilation?
Yeah, in terms of with breathing exercises, they kind of can play a different role. So if you have somebody who's doing hyperventilation exercises, that's fine once they understand what those exercises are doing. Mm-hmm. And after they do those exercises, then to spend some time into recovery. So if you're going to stress the body, it's important then that you relax the body. So, for example, we have some of the exercises that we involve now with the oxygen advantage. We have hyperventilation for 20 breaths. Mm-hmm. but then we do slow, gentle, reduced breathing then for 1 to 3 minutes. So while we hyperventilate to stress the body, to exercise the breathing muscles, we also do recovery. And I think that's the most important component of it. There is an idea with different yoga instructors, and I have to be careful here because there's some yoga instructors who get it.
Yeah.
But there's some yoga instructors who don't get it. And they can be focusing. And I suppose the rule of thumb is you shouldn't hear people breathe inside a yoga studio.
Correct. Yes. That's
probably the best rule of thumb. Now, if they're doing 1 or 2 exercises involving breath of fire or something like that, that's fine, provided that they're doing exercise then to balance that.
Correct.
And the other aspect is, how should we breathe outside of the yoga studio? Like, what's the take-home message? People should be nose breathing. They should be, and even to measure breathing patterns could be useful using what the Bolt score. So like if somebody is listening here and they're saying, well, I think I've got good breathing. Well, how do you know if you've got good breathing? But the Bolt score would give you some indication. And this was tested, the breath hold time was tested by a professor of physical therapy and published in 2018, Professor Kyle Kiesel. He got 51 subjects and he looked at their breathing from a biochemical, biomechanical, and psychophysiological point of view. And he concluded that the breath hold time was a simple screening tool for the presence of breathing pattern disorders. And if the Bolt score is above 25 seconds, there's an 89% chance that dysfunctional breathing is not present. So this is when the individual is sitting down, they're allowing their breathing to settle. Mm-hmm. They take a normal breath in and out through their nose, and they pinch their nose and hold their nose, and they time it in seconds until they feel the first definite desire to breathe, and then to let go, but to breathe normal. Mm-hmm. So you want to have your Bolt score a minimum of 25 seconds. And you will find that people with respiratory complaints, people with chronic fatigue, people with burnout, people with different health conditions, that their Bolt score is often quite low. People with anxiety and people with panic disorder. And, breathing pattern disorders is relatively common. It's probably about 20% of the normal population, even though the literature said it's 9.5%. Mm-hmm. But in the anxiety and panic disorder population, it's as high as 75%. So you can imagine people with anxiety and panic disorder, they have a dysfunctional breathing pattern. Mm-hmm. Their breathing is a little bit faster, it's upper chest, and it can be irregular. And here is a breathing pattern disorder feeding into that person's anxiety. Mm-hmm. And that person can do cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's not going to change respiratory physiology. And if they do mindfulness, it's going to be quite difficult, because if your body is in a state of fight or flight, you can't really focus on your breath. It's difficult to focus on the mind because the mind is agitated. So I'm writing a new book and I'm looking at focus and concentration and attention span, because if I was to think, what are the most important traits and tools that you will use lifelong? It's focus, it's concentration, and it's attention span. And when we're talking about focus, we're talking about narrowing our attention to one thing. And attention or concentration is our ability to hold our attention on that one thing. And attention span is the length of time that we can hold our attention on that one thing. Mm-hmm. But how can you improve your attention span and concentration? Number one is, the elephant in the room is, in terms of sleep, is nasal breathing. In terms of breathing, it's functional breathing. And then to bring in body, mind, and breath awareness. In other words, mindfulness can be practiced down the road when you've got good sleep and when you've got good breathing. Mm-hmm. If you have somebody with anxiety and depression and panic disorder and their sleep quality is poor and their breathing is poor, they're going to have a very challenging time trying to quieten the mind, because the body is in a state of fight or flight. So I think, we need to realize the bidirectional aspects here, that breathing, the mind, and sleep are interrelated. And if one is off, the other is off.
Fantastic. Yeah, because my Bolt score, which you can explain what Bolt stands for. So go ahead and say what Bolt stands for. It's in your book.
So Bolt is for body oxygen level test. And You know, it was just, I suppose it's actually, it's more of an indicator of carbon dioxide tolerance, or at least it's influenced more by CO2. But if we call it with carbon dioxide test, people would say, oh my God, you know. So that's why we termed it that way.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple measurement. Yeah, getting it perfectly right can be a little bit tricky, but I wouldn't worry about that. It's just to give you an indication.
Yeah, so when I first started testing my Bolt score from your book, I was right in the beginning stages of my mold protocol for toxic mold. And I literally started at about 8 seconds, and which was really low. Like, it's a terrible score. And so I just kept practicing. I did the breath work. I get up every morning to this day and go outside and do the walking breath holds, little exercise. And now I'm up to 22 seconds.
Good
So,
stuff.
yeah,
Yes.
so I can definitely see a difference in my body as well as
Yes.
feel a difference, and in my sleep. So in my sleep, when I first had the toxic mold, I would wake like with almost this rush of adrenaline, and your breath is fast, and it's like hard to calm down because your
Yeah.
body is essentially telling you you're not safe. Like, you've got all this mold
Yes.
inside you. You're not safe. You need to fix this.
Yeah.
And so the breath was actually one of the most powerful things for that, because I didn't have to do some, crazy meditation to calm myself down. It was a matter of biochemically increasing my CO2, which naturally calmed it down, like you mentioned, the vagus nerve, and how
Yes.
it just kind of calmed my nervous system. So this is something that's so simple to do, but it's so powerful for the human
Yeah.
body.
Yes.
And so with that, like, what are some symptoms that people are going to be able to relate to that will tell them maybe they're overbreathing or they're not breathing appropriately? What symptoms are they going to notice?
Well, I suppose a common one would be a disproportionate breathlessness during physical exercise. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if your Bolt score is less than 10 seconds, you will find that your breathing is a little bit harder, even during walking, than your colleagues, for example. The most common complaint would be that people just feel that they cannot take a satisfying breath.
Mm.
They say, I just feel that I can't take that deep breath, that they feel some restriction is there. Now, they could have symptoms of wheezing and coughing and breathlessness, and also they could have a stuffy nose. But brain fog also would be a symptom there. So I think it's more about paying attention to breathing and seeing how fast are you breathing. We shouldn't really see our breathing during rest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were to look at somebody's breath during rest, it should be difficult enough to pick up on their breath.
Mm-hmm.
So the very basic test would be for somebody just to look down at their breathing and ask the question, can I see it so easily? You know, is it fast?
Mm-hmm.
Is it upper chest? Do I see significant amplitudes of the breath? Because a lot of people will say that they breathe fine.
Mm.
But then when I look at them, I say, well, I don't think that's fine breathing. You know, I think it's got you here, but we need to make some improvements to it.
Yeah, the body's highly adaptable. I mean, we can function as a mouth breather, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Because
Totally.
you're
Yes.
definitely not breathing at an optimal level. And some people say, "No, I feel fine," and I'm like, "But you could feel better." Like, you don't know how good you can feel until sometimes we make a few shifts in our health, and something as simple as breath exercises that literally take a few minutes, like it's nothing crazy, can make all the difference in the world. So in your book, another interesting point I liked was you mentioned a form of posture, which isn't so much about our physical posture as it is our tongue posture. So talk to us about the importance of tongue posture and why that's so key.
So a normal airway, and when I talk about the airway, I'm talking about the space at the back of the nose, the nasopharynx, and the space at the back of the mouth, which would be where the mouth leads into the throat and the throat itself. And a normal airway is the size of your thumb. But if we have the mouth open, we cannot have the tongue resting on the roof of the mouth. And as a result, the tongue then will tend to rest lower or midway. And a low resting tongue is more likely to infringe on the open airway. So during sleep, then, it restricts the airway, and this can increase and contribute to hypopneas, where there's a reduction in the flow of breathing, or anapnea, is when the person stops breathing altogether. So that would be for adults, that having the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth is very important for sleep, but it also seems to be very important with the connection to the emotions, that there is a calming effect by the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And there's an interesting study as well looking at individuals in terms of balance. And I remember I was in Italy, And I was at a conference, and there was a doctor showing a video of a patient in a hospital. And the patient was walking down the corridor, and they had quite a kind of an unsteady gait. Their mobility wasn't that great. And the camera kept rolling, and the doctor simply stopped the patient, asked the patient to get 3/4 of their tongue into the roof of the mouth, to breathe through the nose. The camera kept rolling, and the patient's gait improved automatically.
Wow.
And I was looking at this is 2016, and I was thinking to myself, only for I'm in the presence of about 100 medical doctors, I wouldn't have believed it, because I'd never have put the connection between correct tongue resting posture and mobility.
Mm-hmm.
It has been studied, but not very much. But one study did look at individuals who were blindfolded and put them on an uneven surface, and they had better balance with the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. So there's something else going on there that probably deserves extra. And so I'm thinking of your sport. You are a paddleboarder.
Mm-hmm.
You need balance.
Yes.
So it would absolutely make sense that for somebody to excel in that sport, that they do have their tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And that has to be trained. Mm-hmm. I only found out about the tongue resting posture in 2005. Mm-hmm. I was in Texas. I was giving a talk on breathing, but there was a myofunctional therapist called Karen Samuel, who myofunctional therapy is it's a popular therapy in the United States, especially with dentistry and orthodontists, because children's craniofacial growth is influenced by their tongue posture.
Correct. Yeah.
And I was talking to Karen, and I said, how much of the tongue should be in the roof of the mouth? And she said 3/4 of the tongue should be resting in the roof of the mouth. So now we always say to our clients, we always need your tongue to be resting in the roof of the mouth. And to find out where your tongue should be, you could do this popping sound. So in order for you to make that sound, you have to have your tongue elevated against the palate. And there's a suction pressure that you're pulling the tongue down to make that pop. That's where your tongue should be. Mm. So during sleep, we should wake up with the mouth closed and the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, because when the tongue is resting in the roof of the mouth, at least we have some chance of maximizing airway space.
I would assume that would also help with people that snore if their tongue is in the proper position during sleep, yeah?
Yes, well, there's two types of snoring. So you can snore through your mouth like this.
Yes.
So, I'll always say to my students, well, now what I want you to do is close your mouth and try and snore through your mouth. Mm. And you can't snore through your mouth if your mouth is closed. But you can also snore through your nose, and it goes like this. Mm-hmm. So this is where there's turbulence inside in the where the nose is meeting the throat and the nasopharynx. But then I say to my students, breathe slowly and take a very soft and slow, gentle breath into your nose and a really relaxed breath out. And when you breathe nice and slow, try and snore through your nose. And they'll find it's more difficult. Mm-hmm. So when we think about snoring, most of the emphasis in sleep medicine is to focus on the airway. And the doctor will say that the airway is insufficient. The airway is too narrow, and this is what's causing the resistance to breathing. But no engineer would look at a pipe, because the airway is a pipe. Mm-hmm. But no engineer would look at a pipe without considering flow. And flow is our breathing. So if you have one individual who is breathing nice and steady, nice and quiet breathing during sleep, they're less likely to snore. But if you have an individual with a little bit of anxiety or asthma, and their breathing is faster and harder, they're going to be snoring. That's normal. But this is where, when I was writing that review article, this has been totally overlooked in sleep medicine, except for one sleep doctor called Dr. Christian Guilleminault. And he was the same doctor who coined the phrase obstructive sleep apnea. He developed the apnea-hypopnea index. So he's passed on now, sadly, in 2019. But he was the founding father of sleep medicine. And, he has talked about the critical importance of restoring nasal breathing during sleep. And unfortunately, it will take about 20 years for that information to trickle down to the masses. Because at the moment, it's in peer-reviewed medical journals, and it's just not getting out there. Now, I've included in my new book, I put two significant sections on it, because with children, we need sleep as adults because we don't function And in terms of mental health, we're not going to have good mental health if we have poor sleep quality.
Mm-hmm.
But a child's brain is growing and it's during the formative years that sleep quality is absolutely paramount for cognitive development. And one study of 11,000 children in Stratford-upon-Avon in the UK, children with sleep disorder breathing, which includes snoring, if untreated by age 5, these kids have a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. So it's not just that these children are suffering from poor focus and bad mood because of their poor sleep. It's changing their brain. Their brains are getting fried.
Yeah. No, it's so, like, I'm glad you mentioned children, because I think that's something that parents need to be aware of too, is how is my child breathing? They start out well enough. You'll notice a
Yes.
baby always breathes through their nose. But children, as you mentioned, their palate develops or underdevelops or improperly
Yes.
develops. And that can lead to improper breathing. And you'll see these kids with their mouth hanging open, breathing through their mouth. And
Yes.
it's setting them up for a lifetime of health issues. So what's a parent to do with a child that they notice is doing some mouth breathing?
Well, just to pay attention to it, and also pay attention, if the child has the mouth open during the day, there's different breathing exercises that can be taught to children, and all of the breathing exercises are free. Mm-hmm. So we put them up on YouTube, and we also use tape to assist with changing the behavior. It's not expensive. Like, it's $25 for 3 months supply.
Yeah.
But I'll just show you the tape, because people often wonder about, well, how can I get my child breathing through the nose? This one here now is a camouflage color, but normally it's orange. This is kind of a test color at the moment. But I'll just show it to you, because I suppose, it's with children during wakefulness. If a child is distracted watching television, they're there with the mouth open. Mm-hmm. And with wearing the tape, it's elasticated cotton tape. Mm-hmm. We have the child wear this for a half an hour a day while they're watching TV. And there's an elastic tension there. So it's pulling the lips together. So if the child is watching television, but then if they forget about breathing through their nose, and if they open their mouth, the tape will automatically pull their lips together. So we're changing the behavior.
That's right.
And then, of course, once the child has established nasal breathing during the day, we can bring in wearing the tape during sleep, especially for kids over 4 years of age. There's two reasons. When a child is breathing through the mouth, you have to ask the question, why is the child breathing through the mouth? Is it because of obstruction to the nose, or is it because of behavior, or is it a combination of both? And we can show children, if the nose is stuffy, we can show them how to open up their nose by simply holding their breath. And then if there's enlarged adenoids, it would be very beneficial for the parent to speak with a functional dentist who can help to direct the growth of the jaws forward. Because really what we want to do is we want to maximize airway space. But when the mouth is open, oftentimes the child will have a high narrow palate, they will have narrow jaws, they will have a smaller airways, their maxilla is set back, so the top jaw is set back and the mandible is set back. All mouth breathers develop crooked teeth. And there's no reason why we as human beings should have crooked teeth. Our ancestors did not have crooked teeth. And it's something that's very related to modern day living. And if you think of, if you were to go into a school of 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds, probably 75% of those kids will embark on orthodontic treatment.
Correct, yeah.
And we don't see that in the natural world. That's not happening in nature. No. But crooked teeth are pointing out to the fact that the jaws are too small. It's not that the child has inherited the big teeth from dad and the small jaw from mom. You can have a big dog and you can have a small dog, and if you cross the two of them, they have pups. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the pup's teeth are being crooked. Yes, of course, crossbreeds, it can happen. But we've interfered with that. But it's in orthodontistry, there has to be a recognition that why are the teeth overcrowded? Why are the teeth crooked? Is it because of the teeth being the problem, or is it because the jaws are too small? And in many instances, you will find it's because the jaws are too small. And the problem with the jaws, if their jaw is too small, there's not enough room for the tongue. And if there's not enough room for the tongue in the mouth, the tongue is going to fall back into the airway. And that's what's going to contribute to sleep disorder breathing. And I went through school, I went through university having obstructive sleep apnea undiagnosed. And the only reason I know is because students told me I was stopping breathing during sleep. But I was falling asleep in class. And if you think that we're grading kids academically based on what they're achieving in exams, you cannot achieve and you cannot excel academically if you don't have good concentration and focus. And in order to have good concentration and focus, you need to have good sleep quality. And people with obstructive sleep apnea, many of them don't have that.
Which is why teaching, those breath exercises are so important. And I love that you touched on nature, because if people will just look at animals in the wild, they breathe through their nose exclusively. Like the only time they will breathe through their mouth is when they're ill. Like watch your dog, unless he's using hyperventilation to cool himself down, he's breathing through his nose. And so we've lost that. And I think we've lost a lot of things about our natural way because of the modern world. And now more so than ever with blue light and EMF radiation that keeps us up all night because we live in this endless summer where the lights are always on. We need these breath practices to calm our nervous system down more than ever.
Yes. And, we can really help to dampen the stress response and bring the body into relaxation. And a very simple tool there is even just looking at the exhalation. So, when we take a breath into the body, that's more driven by the sympathetic nervous system because the vagus nerve is stepping back. And what I mean by sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight. And then the exhalation is primarily under the control of the parasympathetic nervous system. And if we do a prolonged and relaxed exhalation, that in turn, the vagus nerve secretes a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which in turn is causing a slowing of the heart and helping to bring the body into relaxation. And this, Jodelle, all it takes is 90 seconds.
Yes.
Because there's times I'll bring this into my everyday life because if you have a kind of a hectic workload, it's very important that you have a means of whether you want to upregulate or downregulate. So there's times, I remember I was last week and I was in one Zoom link. Of course, now we're all on Zoom.
Right.
I had about 50 people waiting in another room and I couldn't find that link. And you're okay. Now I'm late because I can't find the link and I'm in touch. And I said, okay, this wouldn't be an ideal situation going into a Zoom meeting, talking about breath. So you have to put it into practice. And nice soft breath in through the nose and a very slow and relaxed and prolonged exhalation. And it's very quick. You can bring the body down. You can bring that into relaxation. And then if I was giving a public talk, I normally spend about 15 to 20 minutes slowing down my breathing to calm any sort of, if there's any nerves or anything like that, and just to bring attention into the present moment. But I don't want to go out giving a talk if I'm too relaxed. I want to be in that flow state. So initially I slow down everything, but then I do a couple of easy breath holds. So I breathe in, breathe out, hold my nose and walk around just easy enough. And then I do 3 or 4 or maybe 5 strong breath holds. So I stress the body and this is increasing blood flow to the brain. And now I'm going out alert. So, in terms of if people want to increase blood flow to the brain, breathe a little bit less or hold your breath.
Sure.
And if you want to cause your blood vessels to constrict, breathe harder. If you want to breathe with better functional movement, we should be engaging the diaphragm. And that's nose and that's slow breathing. Because I suppose the diaphragm breathing muscle is not just for respiration, but the diaphragm also provides a role in massaging the internal organs of the abdomen. It also assists in lymphatic drainage. And it also provides stabilization for the spine. So, for example, 50% of people with lower back pain have poor breathing patterns. Now, is it the lower back pain which is causing the poor breathing pattern, or is it the poor breathing pattern, meaning that they are upper chest breathing, feeding into the lower back pain because the diaphragm isn't providing that stabilization? So it's interesting, like the connections there with the breath when you explore them.
Yeah, for sure. It's a whole orchestra that needs to work together, and using those breath exercises are so important. So that maybe we'll take them through just like an idea of, we'll give the listeners a little gift here of like, how would they do the nasal unblocking when they're ready to try it? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So
allergy season right now anyway. So it's like there's probably a lot of people listening go, yeah, I need to unblock my nose right now.
Yeah, no,
so.
it works. And it works as well. It works for hay fever.
Sure.
And the best way to find out is just to practice it. Don't do this if you're pregnant and not to do it if you've got serious medical conditions. So anytime you want to decongest your nose, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose and pinch your nose and gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath. And you're just gently nodding your head up and down as you hold your breath, and continue holding your breath until you feel a moderate to strong air hunger. And then let go, but breathe in through your nose. Wait about 30 seconds to a minute and do it again. And if you repeat it about 5 or 6 times, you'll start to notice that your nose is opening up.
Absolutely.
And it's not known exactly how it's working. It's thought it probably is related to carbon dioxide. But when we bear in mind that carbon dioxide relaxes smooth muscle, we use the same exercise for people if they have a little bit of chest tightness and they want to relieve the airways. It helps to open up the airways. And it also works for people with constipation. So holding the breath because it's relaxing smooth muscle. And
to clarify, you're holding on the exhales, because a lot of people hold their breath on the inhale, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're actually holding out the exhaled breath.
Yes. Yeah, it's stronger. It's a stronger effect. You won't hold your breath for as long, but it is a stronger effect.
Right. Yeah. And when they do that Bolt score too, which they'll find this in your book to test themselves, it's not the exhale until you can't stand it anymore. It's that first little like blip in your body that goes, okay, take a breath. Like it's right then that you count the score. So,
yes.
Right.
Yeah. And you'd want to be sitting down for about 5 minutes before you measure it, just with normal breathing, allowing your breath to settle. So timer, you're just taking a normal breath in and out through your nose. You pinch your nose, you're timing it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, and then you let go, but your breath at the end should be fairly normal. So I suppose it's how long does it take for your brain to react to the point you've stopped breathing?
Yeah. So now let's walk through some rapid fire issues that a lot of people are having and how breathing can actually help those issues, such as like someone with IBS or digestive issues. Can breathing help that?
Yes, it can. We have seen it, and we probably don't know why it's happening, but we have seen it happening. We have seen the benefits over the years. A couple of things. Number one is, don't do strong breath holds if you have issues of the GI tract. If you have irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel syndrome, don't do strong breath holds. But nasal breathing during sleep, breathing light is very important. And that's whereby you could have one hand on your chest, one hand just above your navel. You're focusing on your breathing. You're really slowing down the speed of the inhalation. You're having a very, very slow and relaxed exhalation. And then you take a very soft and gentle breath into your nose, very soft, gentle inhalation, and a really relaxed and slow exhalation. You're doing it correctly if you feel hunger for air. So the hunger for air just signifies that carbon dioxide is increasing in the blood. And as carbon dioxide increases, blood flow is improving and oxygen delivery is improving. So that might be one aspect of why it's working. Another aspect is that you're getting a better balance in the autonomic nervous system. So conditions such as IBS is often impacted by stress. And if you have a person who is in increased sympathetic drive, we need to help to bring them into relaxation. And we do that in terms of slowing down the breath and also by breathing light. And it's the same exercise that we do for people with insomnia if they have difficulty falling asleep at night, because again, they cannot switch off. So how can you bring the body into relaxation? Breathe less air, breathe slow, and breathe through your nose. You feel air hunger, but you'll also notice increased watery saliva in your mouth.
Yes, absolutely.
And you'll start to notice that you're feeling drowsy.
Yes, and that's a marker of vagus nerve stimulation too, is when your mouth has saliva in it, because when we're in that fight or flight, all of our non-essential liquids go away, your stomach acid, your saliva, and so you are going to have problems with digestion that way because the saliva breaks down things, the stomach acid breaks down things. And so, yeah, I can feel that whenever I'm doing the breath, you can feel your mouth start to water and saliva come in. So that's really cool. Now, what about high blood pressure?
High blood pressure, we would focus more on slowing down the breathing to between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute. So we want to strengthen the baroreceptors, which are pressure receptors inside the major blood vessels. We want to have the baroreceptors being very sensitive to changes in blood pressure. And we can strengthen the baroreceptors by slowing down the breath in and out through the nose. And you could be breathing in very light for a count of 5. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, and continuing with that. So that would be one exercise, which is looking at improving heart rate variability and baroreflex sensitivity, and for both hypotension and also for hypertension, but also get the mouth closed during sleep. Because if you have an individual who's stopping breathing during sleep, that can drive up blood pressure.
Yeah, for sure. How about anxiety and depression? You touched on that a little bit, but can breathing help with that as well?
The first exercise I would start off with anxiety are doing small breath holds. And the reason being is because with anxiety, people find it difficult to focus on their breathing, and they find it difficult often to reduce and change their breathing patterns. So an emergency exercise that we use, and also for people with panic attack and anxiety, is a small breath in and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go and breathe normal for about 10 seconds. And again, normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe normal for 10 seconds. That exercise also stimulates the vagus nerve. So that's a very helpful exercise with people with high stress. And we have, over the years, I've seen many people with anxiety, with panic disorder. And even though it's a very simple exercise, it's a wonderful exercise. For people with depression, the first thing that I would start asking them about is their sleep quality. And I think it's being overlooked. And when insomnia and obstructive sleep apnea goes together, depression is higher. And it points to about 10 years ago, I had somebody in front of me and she had depression. And I asked her, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? And she said, I absolutely wake up feeling exhausted. And I said, has your doctor ever encouraged you to look at your sleep, or have you ever had your sleep investigated? And she said, no. And I think it's because the healthcare professional is assuming that it's the depression which is causing the person's exhaustion. The person is exhausted because of their depression. But maybe we need to turn that around. Maybe we need to ask the question, does this person have undiagnosed sleep apnea? Is this person stopping breathing during sleep? Do they have a dreadful sleep quality? And as a result, they can't focus in their day-to-day work or family life. They're feeling lousy. This is chronic anxiety, and chronic anxiety leading to depression. So sleep is where I would start first, and then I would start with looking at slow breathing. So slow breathing and light breathing. And, you know, with depression, there's always a challenge that the person has the energy levels and the motivation to do it. But where possible, I would always encourage, get your mouth closed during sleep, even if you have to tape them out, because it doesn't imply much energy from you to do that. But at the same time, if you're getting the mouth closed and breathing through your nose, your sleep quality could improve quite significantly.
Wonderful. Okay, now what about, have you seen breath help people lose weight, like fat loss, weight loss issues?
Yes, but we can't reproduce it. And this is one element. You know, if somebody comes in to me with asthma, I can pretty much say we would be very comfortable that we can make a difference.
Yes.
If somebody comes in with breathing problems or anxiety even. With weight loss, we've seen it over the years so many times it happen. In terms of people doing the reduced breathing and their appetite decreased.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's a number of reasons for it. In terms of sleep, if you have somebody with poor sleep quality, it impacts their hormones. And one hormone that changes is called ghrelin. And ghrelin stimulates an appetite. So the person eats more, puts on more weight. And as they put on more weight, then it can affect their sleep. And now you have a vicious circle. The other thing is that when we're stressed, we often eat more. So if a person is just feeling a little bit down, they could turn to comfort eating. So really what we want to do with the breath is we want to help to balance the autonomic nervous system. And with that, by improving sleep, and also getting a dampen the stress response, that the person isn't craving or wanting so much food. So that could be one angle there.
Yeah, and with regard to the overeating, maybe from stress or just somebody overeats in general, you'll know this if you've ever done that, because it's almost like you can't take a relaxed breath.
Yes.
You're breathing faster, your heart rate is up, you've got this full belly, and it's almost like, gosh, I'm having trouble breathing.
Yes, yeah, totally. It does. It doesn't feel comfortable. There's a bloated feeling or something. Yes.
I'm assuming the food is kind of restricting the diaphragm from taking a breath.
It can, yeah, definitely. And also during pregnancy as well, the diaphragm is often affected as well. So, there can be different impacts.
Okay, so wrapping up here, so how can what's the first step somebody can do to begin this kind of awareness around their breath and breath work? What would you say?
I suppose the first thing is to start paying attention to breathing.
Yeah.
And even just paying attention, are you breathing a little bit faster in upper chest breathing? Do you sigh? If we have somebody coming in and I see them sighing quite frequently, I know that they are in they're in a state of panic, not a state of panic, but there is some agitation there.
Yeah.
And, it's not normal to be sighing every few minutes. We want to achieve regular breathing in and out through the nose, driven by the diaphragm. We want breathing to be slow and light. And that's where we want with it.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, one of the favorite parts of your book was when you talked about the 3 simple techniques that transformed your life, and one of which was breathing lightly. The second was merging with your inner body, and the third, the third was bringing attention to the present moment. So do you want to walk us through just how you did that?
Yeah, it's funny. In 1997, I had 2 experiences which pretty much changed my life. One was, it might have been 97, 98. I can't always remember the year, but they happened very soon within each other. One was I went to a talk in a hotel in Dublin, and it was presented by 2 individuals. And I sat there for 2 hours with about 35 other people. And I just listened. And I left the hotel and I walked down a street called Grafton Street. And it was the first time that I actually saw the street. And I can remember that it was vivid, that I could hear, that I was seeing what was around me, and that I was there in the street. And the next morning I woke up and my mind was very much back to a racing mind, but it gave me a taste of what happens when you can bring a stillness to the mind, that there's a period of no thought. And that's when I bring in functional breathing and better sleep, but also paying attention to the mind and being more aware of the thoughts that's going through the head, bringing my attention into my body, going for a walk, as opposed to being stuck in my head, which most people or many people do, walking with every cell of my body, following my breathing, taking my attention into the present moment. And it makes a whole lot of sense, but it's really for people to experience it, because for years, even when I was a student reading a book, I could have the book in front of me and I could have the page open. And while I would be looking at the page, my attention wasn't on the page because my attention was in my head. Or I could go for a drive, or it could be in a beautiful scenery and I wouldn't even be there, because education trains us how to use the mind and how to think, but it doesn't teach us how to stop thinking. It's very important that we develop a calmness of the mind and to be able to bring gaps between thoughts. And, this takes a little bit. This isn't, it's not easy starting off, because the mind can be in that active flow. And I would say to people, listen, be patient with it and start observing what is going on in the mind. And every time that you notice your mind wandering and you bring it back, you're starting to train the brain to be concentrated. And it's one of the best tools in life. If anybody was to say to me, a 4-year master's degree or the ability to bring a gap between thoughts, I would choose the ability to bring a gap between thoughts. It's not taught in university. It should be. And hopefully the education of the future is not just about teaching people how to think, because thinking is totally overrated. And people whose minds are full of all of this oftentimes useless information. You know, we're taught how to analyze and to reason and to break information into tiny pieces. At the moment, we are overstimulated. We have so much information coming at us from every angle.
Yes.
It's very important that we can merge with the solitude of the human body, taking our attention out of the mind and into the body and onto the breath and into the present moment. And ultimately, this is how we relate to life. We don't relate to life if we're stuck in our head. And look at the amount of people can't deal with boredom, it seems.
Well,
if they're
yeah.
bored, the first thing they do is take out their phone to start looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, that's an agitated mind.
Yes.
So it's really, really something. There's a void there that we need, you know, that needs to be put out there.
Yeah, and in your words in the book, it's the prisoner of your own mind. And when I read that, I was like, I know, myself included, in times past, like you just feel like you can't get out of the hamster wheel of thoughts and the prisoner in your own mind. So being able to use breath work in order to be in the present moment and calm your nervous system and be at peace with where you are right now, even if you're working towards another goal, is so beneficial. And I feel like every single human can benefit from improving their breath work. So tell us like about where my listeners can find you, and you do have a new book that's on its way, and I want you to tell us about that.
Sure. We've got a website for health. It's called buteyko-clinic.com. That's BUTEYKO clinic.com. And I've got 2-hour workshops for sleep and for anxiety and for asthma. And they're not so expensive. They're $95. They're live online. I guide people through the exercise. And then we have oxygenadvantage.com, and that's kind of more performance focused. And then we are on social media, even though I have to say I'm not a fan of it. I think it's dreadful what social media is doing. But
I'm not on it either.
No. But we did it reluctantly because we felt that we have to get our message out there. So we're using it, you know, to our advantage. But we're hoping that people in the process are you know, not being victims or totally, you know, controlled by the whole social media aspect of it. So yeah, and there's books then. I've got books. My new book will be published in the United States in July of this year. And then I'm writing a new book on focus and concentration. And this is really a kind of a hobby, I suppose, because I think this is really applying breath work and taking it into the everyday field in terms of family life and corporations or office workers and kids. You know, students going to university, you know, it's demanded that they can concentrate. And as I said at the start, who's teaching these kids how to concentrate? No one.
Yeah, and your book, The Breath Cure, is that what it's called? It comes out when?
Yes, The Breathing Cure, July of this year.
Okay,
yes.
fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's actually, sorry, it's out on oxygenadvantage.com.
Oh, okay.
But it will be published in the United States. But at the moment, the order is coming in through oxygenadvantage.com. Then we shipped them to the United States.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I'll have to get my hands on that one now. So, you know, Patrick, you have been a breath of fresh air, and I can't thank you enough for your time and influence over my health and my own breath. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And let's do this again. When your book comes out, I'd love to talk more about that, and then also that focus and concentration piece as well. So
great stuff. Pleasure, Joan. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
You too. Bye.
Is your gut right? Are your hormones in check? Well, ATP Science is my new go-to brand when it comes to lowering estrogen and getting your gut right. In fact, their product, Gut Right, is on the top of my list with regard to an all-around supplement that I would recommend to almost any client I work with. It's so imperative that we get our guts right in order to absorb all the nutrients from our foods that we're taking in. Our guts are under so much stress from our food system, from the stress of the system we live in as a whole, to dangerous radiation we're bombarded with. When you hold your cell phone right in front of your stomach, you're actually radiating your internal organs and kind of breaking down the gut lining, so to speak. So alongside with that, social pressures from social media. Yeah, guys, Facebook and Instagram totally affect your gut because it affects you on an anxiety and nervous level of, you know, you're seeing all the pressures of what your peers are doing and can you live up to that? So it puts pressure on you. So you might want to consider getting your gut right by doing a 10-day protocol of the Gut Right. So simply order yours today. Use the link in the description as well as my code JODELLE, JODELLE, which gives you 10% off. And take GutRight for 3 times a day for 10 days. Then begin balancing your hormones with my favorite product, Alpha Prime. And can I just say that I've had several clients that have lowered their estrogen by half within almost 6 weeks' time. They've lowered their estrogen from astronomical numbers in half by just taking the Alpha Prime. So this is a Jodelle approved product that everybody that's dealing with hormonal imbalances or excess estrogen should be on. So order yours today, start moving the needle in the right direction and feel better faster.